All right, everyone, it looks like we are starting to slow down our attendees coming in. So nice to see and have so many of you here today to talk about what is a very important topic to all of us. On behalf of Cooper and Vivvi, I'm so happy to welcome you today. We're thrilled to get started on this topic, as I said, and thank you so much for jumping in on what might be your lunch hour or your morning time. Really, you are winning just by being here, taking away that win for the day. I hope that we will definitely turn that survival into thriving at some point, and I'm excited to get started. My name is Gretchen Richard. I'm the Director of Family Experience at Vivvi, and I see a lot of names that I know, but if you are coming to Vivvi first time, we are an organization that's on a mission to reinvent childcare and early learning for today's families. We're doing that in a few different ways. In New York, we have 3 campuses currently, with 3 more on the way that specialize learning and care for ages 6 weeks to 5 years. And then nationally, our in-home programs, which essentially take our teachers and the model of our school and place it inside your home. We are literally expanding our coverage to meet you where you are. I also have a 4.5-year-old, and he attends Vivvi part-time, and we've experienced ebbs and flows of separation anxiety over the years. We are currently in a heavy flow phase. So on a personal note, I am excited to listen and learn as well. And like the standard webinar that you've probably attended, we'll try to use the first 30 to 45 minutes or so to present some really great information about separation anxiety, specifically focused on ages 0 to 5, but certainly expanding out into those grade school years, incorporating really wonderful and thoughtful submissions by you, the audience, and then we'll use the rest of the time to answer as many questions live as possible. And judging by the submissions, not only could we talk for a long time about this subject, but we're certainly seeing reoccurring themes in what most families are experiencing, which is a win in of itself, because it reminds me that we are all not alone in this journey. And it's exciting because much of what you're hoping to discuss has been incorporated into the presentation. And we hope that you do take away a practical, applicable tool that can help you and your family develop these better habits right away, even if it's just a simple phrase, gesture, or thinking. And when I say we, I really mean I'm going to be leaning on our expert speaker, Marielle Benjamin. She's a licensed clinical social worker and director of groups at Cooper to be the source of truth. At Cooper, this organization knows that parenthood is complicated. Cooper's goal is to help uncomplicate the parts that could really be simpler. They're truly your online parenting home base. They carefully match you with a group of kindred parents using research-backed expertise to guide you through your parenting journey. Trust me, if you're in the need for some quick inspiration, motivation, or bite-sized tools to use, this is really your online source of truth. And so, Marielle, I'd love for you to jump in at this point, share a little bit about who you are and what you do, and then you can dive right in and teach us more.
Sure. Thank you for that introduction. And thank you everyone for being here. I love that you said it was a win just by showing up, because that's one of my favorite lines, is that you can't be a neglectful parent who's doing everything wrong if you come to a parenting talk. So you already won. I'm Marielle Benjamin. I am a licensed clinical social worker and the director of groups at Cooper. I've been at Mount Sinai Hospital working with children and families for the last 20 years of my career, and a private practice working with parents around how we can best take the research and put it into practice every day. And that's what Cooper, which is launching now, is all about: taking the research and bringing it to a group setting where we can learn together as parents and make some informed and conscious choices about what we're doing every day. So I by no means have all the answers. I want to be clear up front that we're going to talk about things that are hard and sticky and messy forever, because that's what parenthood is all about. And there's not one right way to do anything. So I'm going to present what we sort of know and some good best practices. And then I'm so excited by all your questions, which I got to read through some of them this morning, and really look forward to a lively discussion. I also have an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old. And I was saying to Gretchen, my 10-year-old is at sleepaway camp. So if you want to talk about separation for older children, I'm right there, living it every single day. So I think a good bit, Gretchen, you're working my slides, yes?
Yes, let's
Perfect.
do it.
Okay. just quickly, what we're going to do today is where separation anxiety comes from, like from a developmental perspective, why it's normal and why we shouldn't panic about it, what you can do and how you can practice, as Gretchen said, really practical takeaways. I'd love you to feel like you had those tools, why routines have anything to do with it, and then our time for Q&A. So jumping right in, if you have heard about separation anxiety, you probably heard about object permanence, which is the idea that people and things still exist even when you can't see them. Can't see them, can't hear them, can't taste them. My favorite way to explain this to grownups is the ice cream that you probably have in your freezer right now. That's like, it really resonates with me. So maybe with you. I think about the ice cream that's in my freezer. I know really up to date what flavors are in there. And I can spend an entire day just dreaming of the moment when I will go to my freezer and get my ice cream. But if you have a baby under 6 months of age, the chances are your baby does not know something exists unless it's directly in front of them. Even something, if they were eating ice cream, which is a different talk. We're going to do lots of different things that are different talks, but in case they were eating ice cream, they would not know it existed. They would not be able to dream about it all day long like I have the benefit of doing. And that basically summarizes object permanence. If we go to the next slide, so I said around 6 months because we understand officially, clinically, that it develops between 6 and 9 months, but it starts much earlier than that. Babies all along the way are making the connection with where things have gone and the surprise and delight of finding them again, as you can see in your daily lives. And it lasts forever in terms of the separation that's involved in the idea that you think about something that isn't there, right? Never goes away. So it's a really foundational concept to all of our planning and our memory and what we do every day. Another example would be if you left your house intending to walk to the grocery store, and then you saw your car and were surprised by the idea that you could have taken your car, right? Like imagine what life would be like if you couldn't organize in that way. And so all of those times we're leaning on our sense of object permanence. It worsens and we tend to see it spike. I guess spike is a better way to think about it, around big developmental milestones. And that's true forever, right? So sleepaway camp is still counting as a big milestone where separation would peak, right? Separation anxiety would peak. But if you think about it, all of childhood basically is this push and pull between independence and autonomy and the safety and security of that home base, which we're going to get into in a second. So as humans, we desperately want autonomy. You see this in all of your children, 0 to 5 to 18, right? They desperately want to be on their own. They desperately want competence in areas that they don't have competence in. And yet there's a fear as they get better at something. Where did you go? Are you still here? I need to come back. I still need a hug. Still want the Band-Aid and the boo-boo and the whole thing, even if I also want to jump headfirst off of the play structure, right? Like the constant push-pull. And if you think about it in that framework, it makes sense that big milestones and new changes bring up that sort of insecurity that we see. When I can crawl for the first time and I end up in a room that I've never been in unless someone brought me in there before, that seems so strange. Not necessarily bad, just really strange, right? When I can walk, when I separate at drop-off, when I start new schools, all of those kinds of transitions bring up that push-pull. And so a lot of themes, tantrums, there were questions about tantrums and other behavioral concerns come from that push-pull, not just separation anxiety. And that is, a lifelong struggle as humans, I think, for all of us, of the want to be out on your own and also need the safety and security. So if you frame it that way, I think the separation around big transitions kind of makes more sense. It's not actually necessarily that goodbye or that relationship that's always coming up to play in all of the behavior that we see. And then I want to touch on, oh, sorry, Gretchen, go.
No, go for it. Yeah.
No, I was going to get to temperament, which again is like another talk, but quickly, temperament is how you view the world, right? Your special lens with which everything else gets filtered. So if you are an outgoing, go to the cocktail party and you're holding court and you're just in it and you feel it and it's your jam type of person. You may also be somebody who's slow to warm up who's cautious, who takes a minute, who watches what everybody else is doing and stands by themselves or with the only person they knew there. And then slowly you warm up, you work the room, you make some jokes, you feel better. Or you're a person who gets to the cocktail party and it's too dark, it's too loud, it's too intimidating, it's too much, and you need to leave. And there's not a good temperament or a bad temperament, there are just temperaments. And so one of the most valuable things we can do as parents is to reflect on what kind of information, what clues we have about our child's temperament. And instead of trying to work against that and make a kid who's slow to warm up be the kid who walks into a party and starts holding court, we just better accommodate in the ways that we understand how they work, right? And I want to say that word accommodate has a lot of sort of different meaning attached to it. We're not paving the road for them so that they never have to do anything that's hard or anything that feels uncomfortable or ever learn to be in a dark or loud room or anything like that. But we want to go in with information. And what we're going to talk about with the specific strategies is that when you go in understanding who your kid is, who you are, and sometimes a little disconnect between those two, right? Because we don't have to have the same temperament as our kids. It's not inherited. When you go in understanding that, you can just make better choices. So I'll stop, Gretchen. I know you want to say
something.
I love
it. I love it. I was, you answered one of my questions or comments is that I love that you're not trying to force a different temperament, and you're not also trying to coddle the temperament so that it's so protected that there aren't any other learnings that are happening. That's so lovely. And that can also kind of take, hopefully, the emotion away from all the things you're experiencing, because it's not like a personal choice. It's inherently, how your child is experiencing the world. And I think this is also a great way to just sort of normalize that even though these moments are hard, you're not necessarily doing anything wrong.
No.
In life, right? Like, even if your child has never had that that first moment and they've completely transitioned at that 6 to 9 months, and then at some point they start feeling something later on, like there's nothing necessarily that you did wrong to lead up to that point.
So true. 100% true. Parenting is not like A plus B equals C kind of thing, right? So it's not like whatever you put in is exactly what you get out. Like, we are humans. Like, your child is their own person. And ultimately, you can't be responsible for their reaction to everything all the time. And you want to teach them to be able to have big feelings and big reactions. So one of the things we're definitely going to touch on is just learning to tolerate big feelings in our kids and not feeling responsible for those all the time. So I think you make a really great point that we're going to have to separate at some point. Like, yes, there are things I could be doing better. All of us could be doing that all day long. And, I welcome you to forget at least 50% of what we talk about today and just do a few things differently. But even if we did it all the right way, all the right time, all the day long, we would still have kids who are humans and have reactions and normal emotions. And this is how they learn. They're not born understanding any of this. So we've got to learn together.
All right.
Let's connect this to attachment. So separation anxiety is connected to attachment, but based on some of the questions we got, I just want to kind of clarify that connection. So again, separate talk for attachment, but in the 2 sentences of what attachment is, it's your secure base. It's your loving, dependable, reliable, consistent relationship with a primary caregiver. And the best thing about the attachment relationship is that more is better. You can be securely attached to many people, and love is what helps children grow and develop. Without a doubt, there's hard science showing that love is what does that relationship and the consistency of that relationship really helps children. Name a way, and I can tell you how an attachment relationship helps. But your children, luckily, because you're at this magical place, have attachments to their teachers, to other people who they have in their life, to other caregivers that are present for them, maybe to multiple parents, to grandparents, to other loving figures. And all of those are super valuable. So though there's a lot of pressure in mom world to feel like you're the only attachment figure, it just isn't true. You're usually the first because of the nature of who usually cares for infants beginning at birth, and because some of that relationship and connection and things like knowing the sound of your voice exist when they're born, which is like the cool science that I get excited about. But you can have an attachment relationship with lots of people. And when you think of that secure base, I really want you to think about the idea that knowing that your needs will be reliably met, right? If you cry, someone comes. If you need food, somebody feeds you. If you're desperately scared and afraid, someone comes to you. Just understanding that frees up a child's brain to be able to learn and grow in other ways. When we see like a hypervigilance, kids who really worry about whether somebody will come to meet their needs, we see those negative long-term effects of, a disrupted attachment relationship. But it is not like a super glue bond. And I think that's where some of the questions come from, this anxiety that like, because of that relationship, separation is more challenging or is painful for your children, or they don't have a good attachment if they don't have separation, all the things that we sort of place on this relationship. And none of that is really what we need to worry about. So separately, we need to make sure that our children feel that secure base, because when they feel that base, they can go wander, right? It's the opposite of your thinking, but when they know they're safe, they can go far away because they know they have someone to come back to. And so what we actually want to see as healthy attachment is that, like, if I need mommy, she's there. If I need daddy or grandma or my teacher, they're right there. But I forgot all about them because I'm over here in the block area, because I know whenever I need them, I'll find them, right? No worry there.
I love that. And I think you're going to talk about this a little bit later. You can set or start to put in small tips for yourself that you don't go overboard, which actually probably has a worse effect than like you're trying to think that you're such an attached person, but that's actually maybe building up a barrier that you don't want, or building up anxiety that could transfer into the relationship.
Totally. Like smothering is not an attachment relationship, or like, thinking your child is your purse and you have to bring them everywhere and can never separate or something like that. Like that's not, when we talk about building that attachment, we're reliably and consistently meeting our children's needs and we're there for them. I want you to think like, really just like, I'm there for them. Should anyone need me, I'm there. That is clear to them on a primal biological level that I'm there. And after that, a lot of the other stuff you don't need to worry about quite as much. So we'll come back to why some of your questions are a little bit more about being afraid that your attachment relationship is in jeopardy with separation anxiety, but as we move to sort of the next phase, if I may, we're going to get into some of the specific things just around separation that could make this potentially better for you if you're having problems. So these are just practical separation anxiety. We'll get more into sort of the where and why. So the first one is to plan and prepare. So connected to what we said about temperament, if you've noticed that there are issues with separation, get in front of them as much as you can. This is just like one of those things. If you know that when you start putting on eyeshadow in the bathroom, your child starts to sense that means you're going somewhere and begins crying, you plan your day for like, I need the least amount of time to get fully ready and get to the door. I need my bag packed. I need all my things ready. I need whatever I'm dropping my child without the night before, when they're not looking, when I can have time, when I can be planned, and then I have to have like my goodbye and go. And this is really the same if you're leaving the house or you're dropping them off. And we'll do some scenarios later, but your short and sweet goodbye. So the goodbye, and we'll get into like if they're having, clingy sort of stuff in the house, but the goodbye itself is upbeat, it's lovely, and it's happy. So I want you to think about the fact that separations and, separating and reuniting happen all day long. You want your child to be able to separate and reunite without issues, right? I know all of you would agree that you want that ability for them. But because of something called social referencing, your child is looking to you to sense whether things are normal or things are scary or things are upsetting or things are dramatic or things are hilarious, whatever it is. And so you need to think in your goodbye that you are faking it until you make it. This is maybe pure acting for you, but you are happy and upbeat and saying a simple goodbye. I usually say the best simple goodbye is you tell them that you love them. You tell them that the people that they're staying with, whoever that is, also love them. And you tell them that you always come back or when you'll come back, right? So mommy loves you so much. You're going to have a wonderful day at school. Everybody here loves you so much and you're going to have fun. I will be back to pick you up this afternoon. I love you. Can't wait to hear about your day. Goodbye. Right? And that was the end of it. Or in our house, mommy's going to work. I love you so much. I'll see you at dinner. Have a great day. Grandma's here. She's the best. Have fun. Done. Goodbye. So it's really that short. The things we're not going to say in that goodbye is how much we miss them, that we'll be thinking about them all day, that we really, really wish we didn't have to go to work because in an ideal world, we would never, ever, 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 ever leave them, right? It doesn't matter if these things are true or not. Like we've all had days where we wish we didn't have to go to work, but we're not going to talk about that in the moment of separation. We're not going to address if they're crying. We're not going to address whatever behavior we're seeing. We're just going to say goodbye. And we're going to really model for them that the goodbye is normal. You never want to sneak out. So one thing starting really early that parents tell me they do all the time is leave while they're napping, leave while they're in the other room eating, while somebody's, shaking something shiny. But what you're doing when you sneak out is actually eroding trust. So that is actually related to your attachment relationship, which is that you want to be reliably where you are when you say you're there. And so the sneak out, the sneak attack kind of thing isn't really helpful for that security that comes from knowing that, mommy or daddy are where they say they're going to be. So even for napping, I recommend, and I know that some of you asked questions about language when they don't understand. So they understand more than you think they do, right? From about 8 months, we know kids have great receptive language. They actually understand so much more than you're going to hear them say for years. But also they understand patterns in speech and the tone of speech and speech that's associated with specific events, right? So I want you to practice using this language no matter how young your child is. But if you put them down for a nap and you're not going to be the one there when they wake up, you can just say, have a wonderful nap. When you wake up, daddy will be here, right? You can just get in the habit of saying that and not being afraid that saying that somehow is going to cause this big reaction, because we have to have these reactions to sort of get to a place where we're comfortable with it. Mm. Magical items and secret handshakes are really, you can think of them as transitional objects if you like that kind of language. I like to think about them as your sort of brave tools, like your be brave reminders. I got my oldest to go to preschool by giving her one of my hair rubber bands on the steps outside of the preschool and saying all day long when you're thinking and you're thinking about mommy, you can rub it. See, I have one right now. Always have to have a hair band on. You can rub it and you can remember that mommy loves you and mommy's going to see you at dinner. Or a secret handshake. This is like such a fun thing to do over the age of 3. Make up a handshake that only the 2 of you know. It can be ridiculous and have lots of movements, and then make that your goodbye, so that this thing that's really fun and associated with this special quality, which it is that special sauce between you two, is at a time where you think there's a lot of stress or anxiety, so that's the wonderful way in which we leave each other and then when we reunite. So also thinking about, with all of this, the reunion, I'm so happy to see you. I can't wait to hear about your day. Again, beginning no matter how old they are. Oh my goodness, how many stories are you going to tell me about what happened, right? With that enthusiasm for the reunion, as opposed to saying that, I missed you. Oh my goodness. Did you have a hard day? Was it okay? Were you sad? All the other things like that we tend to bring to that reunion. The checking in after, my best advice for things where you're worried about separation, or if you've never heard anything, like if no one has ever told you that there was a problem with separation and you're just curious, you ask the people you left your child with. And most of the time, those people will say to you, I always think of, because I'm New York City based, right? I think of the elevator as like a really great way to understand separation reactions. So you leave your apartment, you get to the elevator and your child is screaming, has just like lost their mind. You get to the lobby of your building and your child has most likely recovered, but now you are sobbing and crying. So the damage of that separation stays with you all day, but your child may have fully recovered. So you want to check in with the childcare providers or anybody that you are having stay with your child to see that they got better. And then you want to check in with yourself to make sure that those two messages align. If your teachers are telling you that they got better after 10 minutes, why are you still worried about it, at 3 p.m., right? And so you kind of get a better sense of what we're dealing with for reality. Gretchen, am I going too slowly? Just nudge me if
I love it. I love it.
Play and practice, we understand pretend play. If your child is above the age of 1 and you're not doing pretend play, that's a great takeaway to do right now, which is that work through the real issues and the real challenges and the real scenarios that they see every day at home. So if you're thinking about drop off and your child's going to be new to drop off, play pretend school at home and do drop off and practice your handshake and your kiss, and then you leave. Or play restaurant and you are a customer and you order and they cook for you and then you leave, right? So that you really work through what some of that looks like. And that can be with anything. Mommy and daddy are going out to dinner. Show us what you would do for your doll, right? You want to come out for dinner. Let's put your doll to sleep. How do we say goodnight to your doll? How do we tell her that her mommy's going to come back? Work it all through so your kids have that ability. Be patient and consistent. Oh, the other thing, sorry, I want to say about practice is that you can't get better at separation if you don't separate. So if part of this is that you're hearing this talk thinking, gosh, separations are so hard, so I've been avoiding them for a few years. It's the opposite, right? You have to separate so that your child has an opportunity to get better. And that's one thing that's going to come up with schedules. Sometimes it's very hard for a toddler to go somewhere 1 day a week. That's very hard to get used to. Think of how many weeks that would take to really understand, like, I'm not going to have any issues with this place. So that's fine for them. But then your expectations of what that looks like need to be adjusted. Versus if you're going 7 days a week, you're doing the same routine over and over, then it would take you a lot less time to get used to it.
Sorry about that.
Nope. Patient and consistent is for you and your child in practicing, in forgiveness, and nobody gets this right. And then routines is the next slide. So it was perfect.
I love that. And I know these are bite-sized bullets, but I also think to the play and practice, like you got to like take that leap, even though it's going to be hard. But if you can set short little bites versus like, I'm going to solve this entire separation anxiety problem in one night, but like giving yourself that blessing to be able to set yourself up.
Yeah, you have to start somewhere. You may, then again, once you've gone through it, you may say, I'm only going for coffee. I'll be right back. So that if my child cries the whole time, it would just be for a quick coffee. But then you probably want to call before you come back and say, oh, wait, she fully forgot about me and everything's fine. And you guys are playing. And then you say, forget the coffee. I'll go do whatever parents do if they ever had any free time, whatever that mystical thing is, and then I'll come back. So yes, you can practice it in lots of different ways. Great. So why do routines connect? So routines connect because, well, routines are how children learn best. There's no other way to say that from everything for brain development to behavior, having a routine really helps children to learn. And it helps them to predict and to organize themselves. If I understand what's going to happen and I know what's expected of me, I can regulate myself to meet those needs. Eventually, I understand this. Like if you think of a school context of a schedule of routines that you follow, the cleanup song, the lineup song, I'm sure you guys have many of these kinds of things. They're meant to say, this is what always happens every time we do this. And then I, as a child, understand, okay, that's what always happens when they do this. I'm much more likely to go with the flow and to retain what they expect of me when it's consistent. And that goes back to that same freeze their brain up. If I don't have to worry about what comes next, if I'm not actually really concerned about whether this song will ever end and they will ever take me to the playground, I don't need to spend my time and energy thinking about that, right? We see impacts of routines even in overall health, in things like our ability to regulate, even in our immune system, in the ways there's been, really interesting studies about kids who have routines, who produce less of the hormones that signal that we have anxiety and stress going on, right? Because they just understand what's happening. And they teach behavior. Like parents constantly are like, how can I teach my kid to do this thing? Well, if you build it in as part of the routine, then that becomes something that's much easier for them to do and learn over time. They can be very comforting. So there's like this misconception that routines, and this goes to the help your child adapt, but there's a misconception that routines make you rigid. But actually, routines make it easier for you to do something that's not in the routine and have something safe and secure to come back from. So vacation's a great example. Like, we're not hurting our children to go on vacation and break all our routines. Like, what a wonderful thing. Let's all do it more often, right? But part of what helps us regulate back from vacation is having a routine to return to. Oh, this is familiar. This is right. This is what bedtime looks like. Not that time at the beach where I fell asleep in the stroller every night. Or, oh, this is what we do in the mornings, not when, we don't have anywhere to go. And that's what that's like. And so they can actually feel really comforting when your child is doing something hard, which is why we say when you're going to have a huge transition, you want to try to keep other things the same so that it can support your child in saying, okay, one thing is really super different, but the rest of it feels really good to me. It can help quiet chaos for parents. One of the things that's clear in your questions and in life with parents is that, like, this is hard for you. If you have a strong routine, it makes it easier. You just have something to lean on. You pretend that that schedule is fixed and that that's just what you're doing. And then you don't have to allow the sort of tumultuous emotions that you're going through change what you're doing. A lot of us like intended to do something and then we just like end up 12 steps in a different direction, and the routine can help us stay there. And then routines help them feel connected. So when you're worried about your attachment and how they feel connected to your family and how they know what's important to you and your values and all these really important things that we could talk about forever and ever, part of that is routines. What do we always do at the dinner table in our family? How do we always go to bed? What's the song we always sing? Some of that, goes into that feeling of belonging, which is what we're really after when we talk about kids' identities and sense of connectedness.
Love it.
Okay, next up, the oxygen mask, I think there's no better way to say or explain why you should put your oxygen mask on before you put it on for your children. But so many of your questions were about your own anxiety with separation. And what we have wonderful evidence to support that is that separation is harder on you than it is on your child. Again, your child may be having a humongous reaction, but what separates us from a really like a clinically worrisome reaction is also really just saying that your child recovers quickly. And now it's about you. And it's about either how you're tolerating their distress, even if I tell you that that distress is normal, or how that separation is making you feel.
So sorry, I got a little excited and went.
You don't want to talk about the parental anxiety.
I'm going to get out of it. Yeah.
You're avoiding it for your own anxiety. Okay. Well, we're going to force Gretchen to stay here for a second.
The one during one of our prep calls, I know one of the first things you said was like so much of what is happening can really just be from the parent. And that is starting the anxiety wagon going. And if your child is highly anxious, that's making them more anxious. But if they're not, then they're getting triggered by your tone of voice, your body language, etc. So this is yet again some things that we can do on our own to help.
Yes. And I think what I said to you that we laughed about is that, like, I like talking about separation because it's one of those things where you can actually do a lot because so much of it is about you. Right. And so there's very few things where we're like, they're hitting because, this obvious thing that you're doing, but separation, a lot of the things that you might see are because of how you're reflecting. So the first one of these is that social referencing. Your child is very sensitive to how you're feeling. They pick up on your anxiety, they pick up on your stress, they pick up on your distress. And whether that's your body signals, your face, the fact that you're sobbing, which like, I totally get it. But all of those things are feeding into their reaction. So we really need to deal with managing your own anxiety separately. There was a lot of comments about the mom guilt and the distress and the feeling like you're a failure and you're doing everything wrong. And I'm so sad to read those because they're so universally true for all of us. And it's just like, it's so hard that we set ourselves up to feel like we're responsible for all of this. And one of the best parenting lessons, if you can help yourself learn it, is that you're not responsible for your child's happiness all the time, that there's just nothing you could do that would make that okay all the time. And that part of your role as a teacher for your child is to teach them what to do with hard feelings and big feelings and teach them how to take on challenges. And you don't want Sorry.
those big feelings from happening.
Right.
You want them to be a part of the learning experience, as tough as that can be.
We want them to learn to manage the big feelings. So we're never going to, never, ever, 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 ever going to criticize or try to stop the feelings. But what we have to learn is how to have those feelings be in your body and get through the day, right? Those are the basic skills we have to, and be able to do things that are hard and stretch us, because otherwise we can't really grow, right? So when you think about it that way and you say, okay, this is really painful for me to watch my child be upset, but I'm teaching them how to do hard things. And if I asked myself separately, it's really important to me that I teach my child how to do hard things, then I'm here to tell you there is no way to teach your child how to do really hard things if you can't help them tolerate the feelings that come up when they do that. And so that's where you are their secure base, you remain that person for them, but you teach them that's okay. It's okay that you're upset. It's normal to be upset when you leave mommy. That's okay, but you're going to have a great day and I'm going to come back and we're going to be together soon.
Goodbye.
That's about it. We can be sensitive, we can be supportive, we can see our children and what they're experiencing, but we're not going to change that we don't drop you off, and we're not going to change that we stay for 90%, 30%, 50% of the day with you. None of that is going to make that experience different for them. We got to get all the caregivers on the same page. I'll speed up because I know we want to have time for questions. We got to get everybody on the same page. We have to make sure that everybody's handling separation the same way. If you have a caregiver doing drop off and they're staying when you're trying to do this exit at the door, that's not cool for your kids. You may notice that other people can drop off without a separation issue, but you can't. This is one of those special depressing moments saved just for mothers and fathers, right? Like, why does my child scream when it's me, but if grandma drops them off, they happily leave? And it might be tempting for you to say, because they're really only attached to me, right? So it's this incredible super glue that's making that happen. But it also may be the attention and the reaction that they get from you is what they're looking for as a point of connection. And that's when you need to know that it's not healthy. It's not like a great thing. It's actually like, every time I go, there's this huge drama. But if I send my caregiver, there's no drama. And so it might be a time to say, you know what, for a little while, it needs to be my caregiver, because we need to just learn to do these hard things. And then we need to think about, what am I doing in that moment that's making it different?
Yeah, that was one of the questions is should the same parent do daycare drop off every day? Or do you feel like if it's helpful, go for it, but then work to a place where you can filter yourself back in?
I mean, my big pushback would be, that's about you and the delight you wanted in the moment you imagined of drop off, right? And I know this feeling so well. It's like, I imagined I would drop you off at school and it would be so beautiful and we would do our handshake and you would run off into the day. And I don't get that. And it's horrible and it's awful. So I should keep doing it more with the horrible, awful until we get used to it, or I should let the person do it where it's, pain-free. And I would say, for the benefit of your child, you let the person do it where it's pain-free, if that's possible, and you find other places for you to practice your separation and get better at it. I just personally don't think something as important as where they're spending the day in care is necessarily like the place to fight that every morning, right? The last one is the focus on reunions, the quality of your attachment. If you're starting to worry that like, they don't even care about me. Like if you listen to this talk and you're one of those, and I had a slow to warm up, cautious kid, and I swore she was going to sob being dragged out of my arms. And she was like, yeah, and just gone. And I was, so if you're hearing this and being like, I don't think my kid loves me enough because they don't even care, I just want you to focus on the quality of the reunion. If your child is happy to see you again and you come back together again, all is well with attachment. Nothing should be on your mind about worried about that. So focus on that area, not how they leave, but how they come back. All right, so some scenarios. So we've talked a lot about drop off. As a reminder, because there were questions about starting or new schedules, you can talk through anything you want with your child outside of the moment in which you're doing it. So if you want to talk about, hey, you're going to be going to this new really special place we went to visit. Do you remember? Do you remember what it was like? Or if you have a baby and it's like, I don't think they know where they're going, but I'm still going to say tomorrow you're going to go to this super fun place where you're going to play and all these people are going to love you and you're going to do your same day and mommy's going to pack your nap. We want to narrate and talk to our kids about the experience. But the time, especially for like our 2 and above set, the time to talk about what to anticipate and what's going to happen is not in the moment when they're crying and you're trying to leave. So depending on your kid, and this is a temperament thing, it might be great to start a few days in advance, but that might make your kid anxious if you have a differently wired kid who then stays up all night, waking up in the middle of the night, asking you if it's time to go to school, right? Sometimes for joy and sometimes out of fear. But in those cases, you want to think, I know my kid best. I know when to talk about it. And then you want to really simply state what's going to happen so that when you get there, you can have that really nice goodbye.
Mm-hmm.
I should have asked Gretchen if this was controversial to say before the talk, but I really have very mixed feelings about parents staying for a long time after drop off. And I know different places have different policies, and that's why I say I don't know if it's controversial, but I don't think it's always to benefit our children. And so I think for some of you that are having the most problems, it's good to think about really what your expectations are of making it longer. If you're waiting for your 2-year-old or your 3-year-old to say, that's okay, mommy, you can go now, I'm here to tell you that that's really unlikely to happen, like ever, right? And sometimes you can get them to a place where they'll agree to let you leave. Sometimes you have to, phase your way out and you're standing by the door and you said, I'm just in Gretchen's office. If you need me, I'm right around the corner, right? And I understand where all of that comes from, but I'm not sure that a lot of that has to do with your child all the time. So if you're doing that, I want you to just think about like whether there's an agreement you have with your child that they can stick to and that really feels like it makes it smooth and easy, or if it's just your resistance to do that goodbye at the door, because the goodbye at the door would make it faster for them to get used to it, faster for them to absorb themselves into their day, and is a little bit cleaner. So that's sort of what I would say about drop off. I think we talked about a lot of, I don't know, Gretchen, is there anything else about drop off specifically we need to get into?
Yeah, I mean, I think that your childcare centers should also be trusted partners and expert caregivers, and their job is to also learn your family and learn your child and support your child in the best way possible. So there is a little bit of trust that you are going to have to give to them, that they really can support your child in the transition process, but they can also support you in what a phasing in process could look like. So if it makes sense to just start that routine right from the beginning, that's awesome. But they can also work in a practical way where your child is learning the schedule, but they're maybe just not staying in school as long and they're building it up, right? So just like you would say, like building up versus that really, really long goodbye, I think is super important to understand for sure.
That makes a lot of sense to me. And also, I just want to say the value of distraction on the other end. Like, there's probably no one better than the childcare staff to understand what can distract your child away from this. And I know there's like some, I don't know, you might have conflicting feelings about distracting emotions, but this is not, again, we're not distracting them so that they never understand this feeling. We're moving their attention to something else, because we all are capable of getting stuck in that loop where our attention is just in one place over and over again. And sometimes we need a little like shiny object over here to move and help shift. And there's no one better at doing that than childcare providers, right? So it's like the song they put on that gets you to the dance party where you forget the goodbye. And that can't happen if your parent is still there. So I just want to also say that, like, that's why you do the check-in, because if your providers are saying to you, oh, we put on the music and then we do the song and we like take our first tower down and no one remembers that their parents have left, that's a really good sign that your kid is okay, no matter how horrible it looked.
Yeah. And I think too, the other thing to consider, remember way back in the beginning when we were talking about object permanence, you may have a splendid drop-off practice, like transitioning to childcare might be amazing. And then all of a sudden a milestone will pop up and that transition to childcare will change and become terrible for a while. And so part of it is to remember your roots of what this is about and not necessarily alter the practice because it's cropping up, that nothing's really wrong. It's just that they're now starting another phase. So even if it's not happening right away, like stick to your guns as much as possible throughout that phase.
Totally. And don't confuse one area and one thing for another. So like having issues with something else doesn't mean that you would let your child not go to school because they're having a hard time somewhere else. It's actually the reason to say, I understand that there's something difficult going on, but we always go to school. That's what we do, and keep that normal, back to the routines.
And I know you have some themes here of scenarios. We actually have some questions that are related to the scenarios. So I'm wondering if we could do a little bit of catch all. The first is new baby. So second child is due soon in November. First would be 18 months. Recommendations to deal with like this change without also like completely avoiding them, because your brain is only capable of doing so many things. So what thinking about new baby or siblings?
Yeah. So I don't think new baby is necessarily as much about separation as it is about your concerns over attention and how much attention you'll be able to pay to, dividing it, however many children it is, continuing to divide it. And then maybe you care about your partner and your dog and your whoever else you have to divide your attention. So I don't know that I would equate it with, although you can see separation anxiety related to it, I don't think that's the only thing you're most likely to see. I would say for the 18-month-old, as much routine as possible, as much of their world to look exactly like it did the day before they had a sibling to the day after they had a sibling, and to make sure that you can preserve the special moments and special time you have with them, even with a new baby. So it's quality over quantity. It's not that they're not going to have to share attention with you while you're doing all the feedings and newborn care, but it's also that they still get access to you. I would be really careful not to blame things on the baby. That's one of my favorite mistakes that we make all the time, which is like, I would love to read you that book, but I have to feed your sister, right? Which is just setting up for this, like it's you or them scenario. So as much as you can think of the separations that you might see as saying, I know you want to stay home, with your new baby and with mommy and daddy, because we're staying home, which is so strange. We're never all sitting in this house when you leave, unless there's a pandemic, which we all stayed home all the time. And it was very confusing to our children about separation. But you go to school and you have such a fun day. And then you'll come home and you'll tell me all the stories of what you did and what you played with. And we'll be able to share those when you come back, right? So that the separation doesn't become the focus of that. And then to what you just said, Gretchen, we don't let other issues and transitions going on affect the separation.
Thank you for that. And you did mention working from home / pandemic. I know so many of us have either had babies or raised their babies while pandemic, and many of us are still working from home, but also like tips to set up that same kind of structure so that working from home doesn't have to be a hurdle to get through separation anxiety. And so any of the same tips and tricks?
It's really about boundaries. So I would say, we were never meant to try to separate while we were just in the other room, right? Like my bedroom was not meant to be like my workplace from my 2-year-old. I totally get this. On the other hand, what I have to do if I want to maintain that I can be on Zoom calls without my child, in the room, constantly taking my attention, which by the way, if you are cool with that and wherever you work is cool with that, and that's your jam and you've blended it and you're not doing separation, I'm not here to tell you there's anything wrong with that. But if you wanted a world in which you could say, this is my boundary, I'm working, I'm not available to you, you just need to really reinforce those limits. So for the older kids, maybe you put a sign on the door, it's a certain color, right? Red means that I'm on the phone and I'm on a call and you can't come in. Green means it's totally fine for you to knock on the door or just go ahead and run in. I mean, knocking is a hard concept to learn, right? So that you have some kind of code system. You cannot come out to get a cup of coffee if it's the red time and you don't intend to stay. So what I do when I work from home is sort of make a schedule of when I'm going to be available, right? So this is great for all of your little kids and for your caregivers, whoever's staying with your child, hopefully the human on the other side of the door while you're home, right? What you would say is, mommy's going to do some work. She's got some meetings. We're going to have lunch together. And then mommy's going to do some more meetings while you nap and we'll play at this time. And by doing that, that means you can't come out if you didn't say if you told them you were not coming out till lunch, you can have whatever texting situation with finding out when there's free time, but you can't do, I'm going to get a cup of coffee, watch you eating some blueberries, give you a quick little kiss and pop back in. That's just too hard. You have to have expectations that are developmentally appropriate with our kids. I can't do that with my 8-year-old or my 10-year-old. They're like, mommy, I had 25 things to tell you. I wrote my whole list. Oh, no, I'm not ready for you to tell me. I just came for my coffee. Like that, that's not how it's really meant to be. So
I love that suggestion, and that it goes along with, is it helpful when someone wrote in and said, is it helpful to practice like a partial separation, like you're working and they're in like camp at the same location, like this is all happening under same roof, but we're all both making our boundaries. And then after the days after camp's over, we come out and we say hello.
That's so great. And make them a schedule and you a schedule. And if there's one thing we know kids can get into, it's like moving the little sticker on their schedule, where they are right now, what they're doing, when they're going to see you, and that's another great thing to practice. You can print pictures of different faces of caregivers of who's going to pick them up that day and put that on a visual schedule for kids so that they can have reminders of who they're going to see and when they're going to see you. All that kind of stuff is just like a dream to help them to get used to transitions.
Got it. And speaking of transitions, nighttime is an important one for you. And I know we had a couple nighttime submissions. Help us understand what best to do at nighttime.
Yeah. So during periods of separation anxiety, you will see nighttime disruptions, and we got to plan for that. And we have to know that you can have sleep trained, you can have never sleep trained, you can have whatever going on, and waking up in the middle of the night is a normal way that kids express that things are going on with them during the day. And that's just a fact. So the strongest thing you can do is this really secure, repetitive bedtime routine. So if you don't have a bedtime routine, if your baby's really young, or if you just don't have a good one that you like, come up with one that is consistent that you can do every night, like a bath, 2 books, we sing a song, we have a cuddle, and I leave, or whatever that looks like. I find that families make it like very, very long and very elaborate when their children are little, and then they can't sustain it over time. So no pressure to make it long, and there don't have to be like homemade stories and singing marathons or any of that, just quick and short and loving, and that you use that to help ground bedtime in a consistent way. Because that separation, falling asleep might be an issue. You want to do as little as you can to alter that when there's periods of separation anxiety. So you can do a quick reminder, mommy loves you, mommy will see you in the morning, you're going to sleep in your bed, I'm going to sleep in my bed, and we'll be together for breakfast, right? Really just straightforward, exactly how you want it to be. If you're going to do something like different out of that, because you can't tolerate that in the middle of the night, or you can't sort of tolerate your child's distress in general with that, you want to do the least amount possible. So maybe you sit in their room until they fall asleep, if that's something that you wanted to do, as opposed to automatically bringing them in your room, which is harder to then go backwards. But these are kind of customizable depending on what you want the goal to be. But in general, what you want to sort of think about is there's no difference between what they're experiencing at night and what they're experiencing during the day. So you want to be sensitive and loving, but then you want to have some basic limits around what you're willing to do differently.
We've already moved on to the questions, which is so exciting. I have one here where if you're thinking about different days are different types of schedules. So we have a 1-year-old at school 3 times a week, and there's some separation at drop off. And are there things that families can be doing on the off days, or how are we preparing for a whole week when maybe there's school a couple days or a nanny a couple days and off days?
Yeah. Well, kids will get used to as much consistency as possible, even if it's consistently inconsistent, right? So if you have 3 days of school, 2 days of a nanny, and 1 day with your mom, that's not enough days in the week. Don't have me do math. That's not my area of expertise.
Still need more people involved.
Whatever it is, right? So we have got our 7 days and we do them all differently, but we do that same different schedule all of the time. Then it gives your child a chance to hold on to that pattern. It's going to take a little bit longer. Someone asked a question about like a weekend class. They can't do like a 1-hour drop off, but they're doing better in school setting. That's really normal, right? Like a new place where I've never been, or I've been there, but it was a week ago, which in your child's time is a really long time. That's going to be really hard to adjust to. So that might not be the place where you expect the best separation, but that's okay. Because remember that nothing harmful is happening to your child if they sob or feel really upset during that drop off. It's just a question of whether they can get anything out of a 1-hour class. If it takes you 20 minutes to get out of the room and then they still cry, right? Like then it just becomes like, is this worth it for me? Mm-hmm. if you have 3 days a week where you do the same routine, that routine over time should get pretty solid. The caregiver, having a new caregiver those other days, that should get pretty solid because they develop a relationship with that person. So I think it's more the one-offs. Is it worth it? A class here, a class there, that you might want to reconsider if it just feels like it's too much. But things like the date night and like going out other times and both parents going somewhere, if that's the scenario, or, going to social events, like other things besides just you're going to school where you separate, are really good ways to practice, right? Like, I'm going to have dinner with my friends. That's legit reason to separate.
Yep. And like you said, it's short bursts where you can test yourself, you can test your own anxiety, and you can test your child's anxiety. And then for those times when you maybe have school 3 times a week, it is good to do that. All of your best practices of planning and preparing and talking and saying, remember, we're going to school tomorrow. I'm so excited. I'll be going to work too. Like that kind of confidence and in how you're talking about it. Yeah.
And that's where the picture schedule for whoever that person is, get a picture schedule of what they do all the days of the week, even with a 1-year-old. It's really just benefits you to have something concrete.
Makes so much sense. As I said, we could be really tapping into the next lunch hour to do this. There's so many different facets that we can talk about. You are all doing a great job out there. Take these bite-sized moments and continue to learn. And speaking of bite-sized moments, I think that's really all about what Cooper's mission is to do. You can see their Instagram handle here and their website, as well as in the chat function. We have put in a downloadable worksheet that Cooper and Vivvi created with some tips and tricks and really a guide to all things separation anxiety. But I would truly look to Cooper to be a trusted resource. We're so excited that we found you. We're so excited for all of these. Truly, I'll be taking these back to my family tonight to start putting them in play. So Marielle, thank you so much for your time. Thank you to the community who's shown up and been so thoughtful about what you're doing. You're winning just by being here.
Thank you for having me. Nice to sort of meet everybody that I couldn't see, but I'm so glad you're here. Maybe I'll see you in group and that'll be fun.
Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful day. Bye.